Welcome to Plot Twist Radio, the show where creativity, storytelling, and the unpredictable path of the creative life all collide. I'm your host, Erin. Welcome back to Plot Twist Radio. Today's episode is for anyone who loves storytelling that feels like stepping through a door into another time. My guest is a New York-based actress, writer, and producer with 2 production companies. 18 Bleecker Films, which she runs with her son, and Demi Bula Studios, where she explores darker, more theatrical narratives across multiple mediums. We talk about how her creative path evolved from journalism and documentary work to acting, screenwriting, producing, and eventually landing in the format that fit her best: immersive spoken storytelling rooted in mythology, folklore, and old New York history. Her newest release, The House in the Middle of the Street, is a true multi-sensory project. It will be available in hardcover and audio, and even as a vinyl edition with a video storybook component. And yes, she narrates it herself, which makes the whole thing feel even more intimate, like a story told by candlelight. We also get into her writing process, why finishing matters more than perfection, and why sometimes the best creative moves happen when you stop getting precious and start following instinct. Settle in, because here is my conversation with Jennifer. Hello, Jennifer, and welcome to the show. Before we get started, can you tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
I am a New York-based actor and writer and producer. I have 2 production companies, Demi Bula Studios and 18 Bleecker Films, which is I partner with my son. He's a filmmaker. We did a bunch of films under 18 Bleecker. Demi Bula Studios is my production company. I created it because his style is very different than mine, and it does gravitates towards more darker tone narratives. And theater, books, like the scope is wider than only cinema. So Right. That's why I created it. And yeah, that's me.
I I like that you have the 2 to separate. I know, like, for me, when I went into writing, people know me as a ghost hunter, so I kept Erin for that, but I had to kinda separate for my fantasy and whatnot, and I had to create this whole new persona because for whatever reason, if you separate the 2, they do better on their own. As you said, you work across many mediums: acting, writing, directing, producing. Which identity came first for you?
Writing and acting. Writing because way back when I actually had background in dance, and I was in a dance company when I was a teenager. Like my mother immigrated from Greece, and at the time she said, "Okay, we've taken this art thing far enough. Like, that's not why I came to this country. You have to be doctor, lawyer, get a real job." So I did leave the company at that time and so when I went to college, I wanted to study performance art or literature. And my mom said, no, you have to pick something stronger than that. So I studied politics. And I was actually at the time in a Soviet foreign policy concentration. And when I went to school during that time, the Berlin Wall came down. I was at NYU. And so I remember my Soviet foreign policy teacher saying, you guys have now become history students overnight. But I also studied journalism because I was thinking, like, how do I get tapped into my creativity? So I studied journalism with politics, and I went into working on documentaries and writing for newspapers and magazines. And like my first couple of articles were, in like local New York City small publications. And I didn't love it. I liked the interviewing part of it and researching people and places and history. But, one thing led to another. But at the time, that's a job I had. And I was a young mother. So I was still getting out of college. Meanwhile, like in my early 20s, I had my son. I had about a year left of college to go. I was working for some publications, and I was always looking for some small job on the side to make ends meet. And at that time, I was looking through the paper and I found an ad for an assistant producer. So I went. This I worked for this producer that did music videos and films, and so I was his assistant. And we were on set. Actually, it was a music video, and the artist was Milk Bone to Milk Crate. He was like a white rapper in the early '90s. It was pretty funny. Actually, Queen Latifah came on set. That I met her.
Really?
Yeah. And, I was impressed. But so something happened with one of the actresses, and they said, "You can fit that outfit, you're going in." So they
Wow.
called me in, and I went home that evening, and I was like, telling the story, like, "Oh, this happened." And I thought, "Wow," I had always fantasized of being an actress, but I never wanted to say it out loud because I knew how my family felt about entertainment. They were like,
Mhm.
this is not why we came here. If you want to be a real artist, go back to Greece. That's not what America is for. So and I get it. There can be some truth to that. I mean, we're very capitalistic here. But so that started it, gave me a little taste. And from then on, I was like, I think maybe I'll look at the paper and see if anyone's looking for an actor. And I took a class, and one thing led to another. So it really started with acting. And but I always wrote. I continued to write at home, and every morning, like, I still do it since I'm in my early 20s, I write in the morning. It's the first thing I do. First, I kinda, like, just, stream of conscious, and then if I have a story that comes to me, I'll write it, and I'll just put it away. Oh. Did that for years, and kind of always knew that I would lean into that a little later in my life, but I was patient with it. I thought, that's not where I'm at now. And it is interesting, at least my experience in life as an actor, as a writer, as a producer, as a one-time director is it kind of naturally shows up and an opportunity shows up and I either take it or I don't. And that's really how I stumbled into all of these areas of creativity. I, with the writing about 10 years ago, my son, who's a filmmaker and he's a director and writer, he said to me, you're not really getting the roles that you want as an actor. Why don't you write something? And I'd heard people say that, and I was like, nah, I don't want to go that way. Like, I want to get the role. But I thought about it, and he said, if you want, you write something, I'll help you direct it, or I'll direct it for you, or connect you with someone. So it got me thinking, and I sat down and I really started writing in screenplay format, which didn't come easy to me. And but I have written a few scripts that were made, like shorts. And s- so I started writing and I was shooting for writing this feature
Mm.
and it was taking forever. And my son said, why don't you just write a short so that you can have a beginning, middle, and end and finish something. And then once you finish something, you can lean into doing something else. I think that that energy of completing something and then letting it go gives you the strength to continue to do the next thing and the longer project. Just like don't hang on to it forever. You know, make a commitment, be disciplined, write it, get it out there, almost like write for a C plus, and then you can revise it. Like, don't get stuck. Just complete it.
Right.
So I did that, and that's where a few shorts came out of this larger feature that I was trying to write. And from the short, there are a few characters that led me into writing The House in the Middle of the Street. That storyline is really from that larger world that I've written about 10 years ago. And it really was like one day my acting agent, Julie Colbert, said to me, you have all these great stories because I was telling her about what I had written and that, it's all sort of mixes with some historical fiction. And a lot of it is New York based because I'm very interested in history, but I
Mhm.
love like old New York history. And she said, I don't know, why don't you just like write it like in a long format? And I was like, no. And then I had it in my mind. And one day I woke up and I was like, I feel like writing this story. And I woke up, I just designated like my mornings. I woke up at like 5:30 every morning, did like a little morning ritual, my coffee, light a candle, do the things that I do, a little meditation, some like just stream of conscious writing. And then I would spend the next like 4 hours seeing what came out. And The House in the Middle of the Street came out, which now, and then, one thing led to another. And I found this amazing publishing company, Rarebird, that said, so I actually recorded The House in the Middle of the Street. At the time when I wrote it, I thought, I'm just going to narrate it and put it up on my platform just for free, just for people to hear as a New Year's Eve story, because it is a New Year's Eve story, or an occurrence happens on New Year's Eve. That's the base of the story. And so, I was going to just lay it on voice memo and then put it up on my platform. And my husband, who's a musician, said, "Oh, why don't you use my studio and record it with my sound engineer?" And he said, "I think he's still around before he goes back to Europe." So I called him and he said, "Yeah, I have tomorrow morning. Come at this time." And I hadn't actually finished the story yet. And I thought, all right, let me finish it and run over there and lay down the track. And when I played it to my agent, she said, "I don't think you should just give it up. Let's see what we can do with this." So that was the beginning of The House in the Middle of the Street. And I had really written it originally to be spoken because I am very enchanted with storytelling and poetry and, people gathering and reading together. And then from there, I realized that it was easier for me to write in that format than in the screenplay format. So now I've taken the story that I created 10 years ago, which has a whole like historical fiction core to it about New York City in 1836. And that's really where like the next few tales in this series will bring you. It's really going to tell that story that I originally thought I would tell on screen. And I never would have thought that it would have ended up this way, but it did. I just sort of followed it. Um, and I mean, it's very satisfying. I'm really enjoying that. I mean, it's amazing. Even next week on February 16th, I'm going to do a reading at KGB Bar in Manhattan. It's Lower East Side. And just to mark the release of the book on the 17th of February. And when I went to check out the venue, one of the owners, Lori, she's bringing me through and she's telling me the history. And I was like, this place is amazing. And it was built in 1838. And I thought, when she told me that, I said, you got to be kidding, because that that is where my story's going, to that period in New York. And I thought, wow, I'm definitely going to incorporate this building and what was there. And so, yeah, my experience has been, as long as I show up and keep my eyes open for opportunities, and I guess don't get too precious with things, just stay open and willing to like follow a hunch or an instinct, things come up. And, that's how I directed. I directed one very, very micro short film. It was something I wrote in COVID when a friend of mine was dying. And so again, I had asked my son, like, do you want to direct this little piece for me? And he said, you know what? I think you should do it. As an actor, you're going to learn a lot to get behind the camera. And I found myself directing it and I learned so much. It made me a better actor to step into that role. And, there's a little film out there. And I don't know if I would lean into directing more, but it was so worth it. Of course, like I pulled together a very small, tight crew of people. So love projects. So everyone was really working overtime. It's a great experience. It's a great experience. It's like I go with my instinct. And as a producer, I really usually produce things that I'm creatively involved with, either as an actor or I've written it. There have been a few times where I've produced things that I'm not, involved in that way at all.
Mhm.
But it has to, again, be a story that I'm just so taken with that I feel like I don't care if 5 people see this. I want to be a part of this and I want to be a part of putting this out there. So yeah, that's how it happens.
That is very interesting, and I love that you love New York history. My day job is a historian, and I focus on New York
Yeah.
during the Civil War, so yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so I
I'm gonna hit
that
you
piques
up.
my interest. It's amazing to me your journey and how you pressed on because I know from writing, you can get in your own head, you can be your own worst enemy, you can stop yourself, but you kept going and now you have this amazing book that's coming out on the 17th, you said?
Yes, February 17th. Yeah. It's
So
coming up a year, so that's fun.
so the project, it's being released, in vinyl and hardcover, correct?
Now at Rarebird, through Rarebird Public, signed copies and the vinyl, and then on February 17th, that's through Simon& and Schuster on all platforms, and that'll be hardcover and audio.
And you're the one narrating it, so that's gotta be even more special for you.
Yeah, it's really great.
I love my voice actors, but I could never do it. But if I could do it, I think it would have so much more heart to it, because that's your words and they're out there. So I look forward to hearing it. What inspired the multi-sensory approach? You kind of touched on it a little bit, but what kind of inspired that?
Well, originally, I really thought of it as I wanted to tell a story like you would around a campfire or to your child, or, I like ghost stories. I think I'm very interested in what you're doing. I've always, grown up telling ghost stories, liked to listen to them. I come from a Greek family, so that's in the folklore that I grew up with, mythology and things that are fantastic that actually are among us. So, yeah, I like the warmth of storytelling. So it really started there. And then being able to have a book to hold on to with no sound, just yours, your imagination, your speed, I think is amazing. I read from books. I don't love tablets. I do with some things, but I still get the newspaper, the New York Times. I like touching things and reading them and curling up with them and shoving them in my bag. And so, a hardcover book is amazing and we need the words on the page for ourselves. And
Mm.
I also developed, which is only available through Rarebird if you get the vinyl, a video storybook, which is for some people, I think overstimulating, but some people love it. You look at it, it's as though you're reading the story and the pages, are flipping and you see the words, you hear my voice, and you also see illustrations. So I think that to me, I love that. Um, it's sort of like a film without being a film. And I think it's exciting that we have so many ways to express storytelling now.
Yes. I agree. I agree. It makes it for the reader, listener, whatever you wanna say, it really puts you there if you have the multiple sensories going. As far as the illustrations go, how involved were you in shaping the visual world there?
I was pretty involved. Miles Mullen he did the illustrations, terrific artist and painter. He does really beautiful stuff. And he hadn't illustrated in a while. And I approached him and he said, yeah, I haven't really put pencil to paper, but let's do it. Let's see. So we really talked about it. The story, is about this house. And I was very clear with him on what this house was and that it starts one way. You have like the house as you meet it. The house definitely is a character. And then what happens as the story goes on, it becomes dilapidated and uncared for. And so we talked a lot about how do you transform that illustration And we had a lot of fun with that. And he did some animations too, which I'm going to put out later for some promotion. And the children, you know, they are unusual creatures, the two children that show up at the door on New Year's Eve. So we talked a lot about, I never say what time we're in, that I wanted to place them in a framework where someone could look at them and see they're not really of our time without, just as the first visual presentation. And you're going to take as much as you want from that. But that gives a clue as to where they come from and who they are. So, yeah, and we talked about the white ribbon around the Virgil's neck and then the white ribbons around the girl's pigtails. Like those white ribbons are important. They're Easter eggs for the later story, after, the next story. So it was pretty detailed. And I described some of the mythical creatures to Miles. And we had some limitations and we had time limitations, which I think is really interesting for creativity because sometimes when you have limitations, it ignites a different kind of creativity. Like, what can I do with the time that I have?
Mhm.
And so he made some interesting choices with how to show the creatures without fully showing them. And I love them. I mean, I'm so grateful for his work. It's amazing.
As far as illustrations go, there's people I've talked to authors. I own a publishing company as well, and finding that illustrator that gets you can be so hard. It can be so hard, but to hear that you guys mesh so well, that's fantastic. You got a good product there. So, what is your writing process like? For instance, you said you do it in the morning, but do you outline or you just kind of like free verse it and see what happens? Or
I mean, with this story in particular, I already had created a world. So it was simpler to be able to, like, I know all the characters. I know well past what you're seeing.
Mhm.
So I'm walking in with a lot. But I do an outline. I have to fight with myself with getting stuck. And I force myself to do a full arc. Like I said, even if it's a C plus, like just get it. Beginning, middle, end. Beginning, middle, end. Just get that scope, that sketch, and then go back and change and da da da. So I do have an outline, pretty ritualistic. So I get up at the same time. I go, I light my candle, I write a little, I get the paper, I get my coffee. After I write a few pages just to clear my mind of nothing, I like read the headlines, I read the obits, like that's sort of like my bookends. And then I put the paper aside and get into it. And I used to write with pen and paper, and I do love handwriting. In the book, I talk a lot about letters, and I am somebody who still writes letters. And the outline I will write, with a pen, not on my computer. But now, I have my computer. There once was a time where I had a typewriter. I still have it, but I don't use it very much, honestly. But I sit down and I, you know, s- jump into where I left off and I write for a few hours. I write until like the steam swells it. It's like at one point, like my experience is the hardest thing is jumping in. Once you jump in, you're in there and you're like, wow, and time passes. And then there's sort of, I hit a soft wall. And when I do that, I usually take a break, get something to eat, maybe do a little movement, then go back and see what else I have, maybe an hour and a half. But usually after that first stop and I come back 30 minutes later, I don't have much more but an hour and a half. And then I stop. And I do have a life where I have a job, I have other things to do, that as of right now, I can't spend the whole day into the night writing. That's sort of a fantasy that I haven't manifested yet. That's why I wake up early. And it's great because it's quiet. No, the world has not woken. And I think that lends to being in that like beautiful space of writing and in your thoughts, your internal world. So I do all that, finish it. I only show my work for review to two people that I really trust. I'm not a fan of, you know, writers groups or I almost find that scary. I don't know how, like, I'm curious what you think of that because I know writer friends and they're very successful and they do that. To me, it is really incubating and I don't have the skin. I don't understand how it can grow and be yours. Right. If you have people cutting in and saying, but this, but that. But there are two people that I really trust that when it's at a certain place, I'll hand it to them and they can be a third eye for me because I do think that's important, but not until I've finished it, really, the first draft.
Yeah, I actually agree with you because I mean, not to begrudge anyone that does that, but for me, writing is deeply personal and, you want it to be your story and you have to worry if in these groups someone may see the idea and take off with it another direction, then it's not your story anymore. You have to worry about that. So yeah, I I guess it could go either
Different
way.
people think differently and they have a different style and nuance and maybe don't even know where you're going until you have to get there first, and
Yes.
not everything is for everybody. It's not supposed to, it's like that's what makes horse racing. We have to be different. And, and I think I'm at the place where with my creative expression, uh, I can offer what I can offer. And I have a certain experience, I have a certain imagination, I have certain likes, I have certain dislikes. That's what I have to give. It's not right or wrong. It's just that's it.
Exactly. I mean, what one person may like, another one may not. And as an author, that's really hard sometimes to get that kind of feedback. I don't like it, but that's part of the industry, but at the same time it's a learning buck and you kind of learn, okay, so these people don't like that. Well, let me kind of craft it to where I find my writer or my readers, that my audience. And once you find it, to me, it's therapeutic. The whole thing is therapeutic. When I first started, it was not. It was chaotic. But do you find writing to be therapeutic as well?
Definitely cathartic. Someone would say, is that autobiographical? Like everything is. Some ways, even when it's in a fantasy world or a fairy tale. I mean, this particular story, The House in the Middle of the Street, it's laden with a different period and a different time and different characters and details, but it's my emotional experience that I've had,
Mhm.
and, people can be creatures. People can show up one way and become something else. We all have our demons. And that's what I love about mythology and fairy tales. They're, to me, and I was drawn to this from when I was very young. My uncle would tell me like Greek myths and sort of with morals. And um, he actually gave me a Hans Christian Andersen book when I was young, and I just tore it apart. And when you read those fairy tales and Brothers Grimm, they're wretched. People
Mhm.
got young, like the Little Match Girl, which was my favorite. This is a little girl that freezes to death on New Year's Eve. And I was definitely influenced by that story, for this. And I had a second grade librarian that asked me, she said, what's your favorite story? And I told her that was, and she said, why don't you memorize it and story tell it to the younger kids? And I mean, that's really when I understood inside of myself, I want to be a storyteller. I want to, it wasn't, I didn't even think of it like that. I want to be, it was like, this is where I want to be telling
Mhm.
stories, experiencing stories. But, they teach it. It sounds a little cliche, but it's true. Like they teach us how to live. And these mythologies are extreme for a reason to really make the point, and it's got to be epic because life is pretty epic. It's like humanity's pretty epic. I mean, look around what's going on now. It's
Right.
great. I mean, they're not hiding anything. Like it's just like Shakespeare on stage right now. But to me, it's like so life giving, and there's truth in storytelling. I mean, I can't wait to read some of the things that you wrote because I do like to read things and fall into someone's world. And I know that they're telling me for a reason. that it's personal, and it helps me and it makes me feel less alone or more empowered or inspired or just like, oh, wow, that person understands that simple pleasure or that fear like me. It's amazing. I mean,
It
art
is.
is amazing that it can do that for us.
It is. It is amazing. I was just in reading a book today. They call it our competition, but technically it's not competition. I like to think of it as, we're all in the same community. But I was reading the book and I was like, she is really, really good. And this is why she's so successful. But she also thinks like me. And knowing that there's people out there that are, live in these fantasy worlds, it really helps. It really does.
Writing and being able to express myself and my experience through this art form and genre is like feels inspiring, lifting, makes everything right. It makes me feel like whatever I've experienced, even the bad stuff, is worth something. So it's great.
Yes. So do you see this expanding? I know you said it kind of came from a screen type situation to begin with. Do you see it expanding into film?
I've talked to my agent, and my agent kept saying, "You can do this, you can do it." And I said, "No, I mean, if Tim Burton wants to do it because it's whimsical and that kind of Neil Gaiman vibe." And she's like, "I don't know, my film Clock Shop, which is black and white, and it's a little bit Twilight Zoney." She's like, "You could do it in a stark way and pull your people together, but however it ends up, I definitely am looking towards cinema for this story and also what comes after. I think it would, yeah. I mean, I love cinema. I'd love to see it go there.
They're my favorite. I mean, I'm a ghost hunter, of course, they're my favorite. So I can't wait to read it. I really cannot wait to read it because it's been a while since I found something that's really piqued my interest. But you've got, the 1800s is my thing. New York is my thing, and you got horror. So I mean, I'm there. I'm here for it. And if it ends up in cinema, I'll be the first one in line.
Yeah, I've done. So yeah, it would, and I'll definitely send you an audio. I want you to, and the video storybook component. I'll send it to you.
Awesome. I cannot
Let
wait.
me know what you think. If it feels overwhelming to you, do you love it? I'm so interested. How people take it in.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So, what's up next for you after the release of this?
Well, I have 2 films that are coming out that I'm an actor in, which I'm looking forward for their release. I'm not producing or anything like, it's great to just jump in and be an actor and just do that too.
Mhm.
So that is coming up and we'll see. I'm writing right now and I'm excited to see, where it leads me. Gonna keep my eyes and ears open and go with the instinct, see what happens.
That's the way to do it.
Yeah.
So, where can everyone find you?
You can find me on Instagram under Jennifer Sklias Gahan, my website, jenniferskliasgahan.com, the house in the middle of the street. Also, that website, 18 Bleecker Films is one of my companies. You can check out some of the films I've already done there. And Demi Bula Studios has a YouTube, and that carries the short films that I've done. The one that I directed, Clock Shop.
Gotcha. All right. Well, I'll make sure those are in the show notes. Thank you so much. I love this episode because it's such a reminder that creativity doesn't have to stay in one lane. A story can be a script, and then becomes a short, and then becomes a book, and then becomes something completely new, if you're willing to follow it. Jennifer's book, The House in the Middle of the Street, releases February 17th on all platforms. And if you want the special editions, including the vinyl and the video storybook, those are available through Rarebird. I highly recommend it. Jennifer sent me a copy, and it's incredible. For those of you like me who love a good haunting story, this is the story for you. I'll make sure all of Jennifer's links are in the show notes, including her Instagram, websites, and her production companies, 18 Bleecker Films and Demi Bula Studios, plus her YouTube, where you can find her short films, including Clock Shop. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow Plot Twist Radio, leave a quick review, and share it with a friend who loves film, folklore, and stories that are a little bit magical and a little bit haunted. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep creating, keep chasing the hunt, and don't be afraid of the plot twist.